Hi everyone, Luke here from Figmento Films, and welcome to the Pictorialist, a filmmaking and photography podcast. In this podcast, I just try to aim it mostly at sort of fellow creatives and potential customers. So in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at a few camera announcements that have excited me this week, and I'm also going to be looking at why do I do this, and I'm also going to touch a little bit about on some of the a possible negative from one of the recent updates for the Lumix. Now, I've been massively a big fan of the Lumix S1 updates, but there is potentially a little bit of firmware that needs to be included and upgraded to fix a couple of problems I've been having with my S1 since the upgrade. More after this. Okay, so I'm going to start with the bad. So as you're already aware, I was massively over the moon with the recent 2.0 upgrade, firmware upgrade for the Lumix S1. And for the most part, it's been working really well. But I have found a strange thing that's been happening, which is when I'm using a DMW XLR1 adapter, which I use to plug in my mics into the camera for professional mics, and then I put my Portkeys P6 monitor on the top and plug it in, the camera's freezing. And it seems to be happening if I've only got the monitor on, it seems fine. If I've only got the XLR unit on, works fine. But both of them together seems to be overloading the camera and making it freeze, which is a bit disconcerting. It also kept trying to write onto memory card 2, which is the I've got a XQD card in, which is what I usually shoot all my video to, and what's been happening is when I plug the screen back in, it jumps the settings back to a previous setting that I'd used, and that setting included recording to my SD card as opposed to my XQD card. So please, Panasonic, if by magic you manage to hear this, really got to upgrade a new firmware update, or if you could tell me, or you could tell us anything about why this is happening, it would be great. It looks as though I can work around this, but to be honest, I would probably put a Zoom H4n on top of the camera, and what I like to do with that Zoom H4n is put that on top of the camera, record levels into the H4n, and then have a mic out into the camera itself. So that mic out going into the camera, the sound won't be amazing, but the sound in the Zoom H4n will be really good, and you can control the levels, and I think it might even have a better noise floor. I'm going to do more extensive testing soon. And that's usually how I shoot like a pro job, if because of redundancy. Basically, I can record sound onto an SD card into the camera as well, which helps with syncing, and that's how I get really good sound quality usually. But I've brought the XLR1 as a way to possibly cut down, improve turnaround time, and for doing stuff like this as well. So it's a bit disconcerting this. So if Panasonic or anyone listening knows what might be going on, this would be awesome. As far as the rest of the update goes, it is the best update I have ever seen a camera manufacturer ever do. It is insane what they've done, and everything else seems to be working fine. So, you know, that's the bad news out the way. But now we're going to get into some like recent announcements. And I'm going to start with Panasonic, actually. It's not all negative for Panasonic today. Well, it seems negative, but they've just announced the GH5 Mark II. It leaked, and you can find the story over on Rumours. And everyone's been eagerly waiting for the GH6. The GH5 has kind of achieved that legendary sort of like status now, but it was 2017 when it came out, and people have been eagerly awaiting the GH6. So they've announced this Mark II as a kind of, I don't know if it's a stopgap, and looking at the specs, it's a bit underwhelming. What Panasonic really need to do, perception can really help drive the market, rightfully or wrongfully. For me, for example, with the whole autofocus thing, you have to accept that there's a giant market now, or a growing market of people whose job is to make YouTube videos. They aren't working on films or making films, they're doing YouTube videos, and their views, everyone's got some bias, and their views will influence the market because they're the people people are going to see about these cameras. And one of the things that's come out of this is autofocus, because it's a massive deal for anyone making any type of vlog. Typically for me, I don't use autofocus when I'm doing professional work, though I do think there might be some applications for it. Maybe a bride walking down the aisle, for example, could be useful to have autofocus for that. Side note though, if you're so invested in autofocus and embodied image stabilization, you're going to be in for a rude awakening if you ever progress to working on a movie set and they give you like a red or an array and you say, where's the autofocus or where's the IBIS, you're going to get laughed out because they won't be using those. There's an art to focus pull in. It's a fundamental part of film, from documentaries to narrative pieces. You need to learn the importance of being able to pull and control focus. It's really important. It's not just there for convenience. It can help tell a story and a narrative all in itself. Saying that, they do need to upgrade and ultimately give people and consumers the opportunity of whether to use autofocus or not. It's better to have something and not use it than to need something and not have it in the end. Saying all that, I do love my S1 and my S5. I think they're great cameras, and there's pros and cons to pretty much every camera. And I'll also say that it's actually really hard to get a bad camera these days. There's incredible cameras out, and that goes without saying. For a couple of the exciting cameras I'll mention in a moment, you don't have to buy them because they're new. If you want to buy into the Sony systems, for example, you could still get a Sony A7 III. It's a great camera. A Sony A7C, great camera. We've got to a point now where I feel like we're entering diminishing returns. Like, it's not that these great cameras aren't doing amazing things at those high prices of like the Sony A1. It's just that you might not be reaping the benefits of those things as much as you think you'll end up reaping them. For example, shooting in 8K also means you're going to invest in more hard drive space and more processing power for your computer. There's always a trade-off somewhere. There's always a pro, there's always a plus, there's always a minus. Next camera also apparently Panasonic are announcing their thing on the 25th of this month, and I'm really hoping it's not just a GH5 Mark II with those specs. If they do something incredible, that would be great. I know I have my biases towards Panasonic, just like many of you will have your biases towards Canon and Sony and Nikon. It is only natural. You have a feeling for the equipment that you have because you spent and invested so much money into it. But it's also worth separating that sometimes as well and just making choices that aren't always driven by heart. Because ultimately, we all benefit if there is a competitive market. We all get more competitive prices and better technology. Ultimately gets filtered down to us as people are trying to compete for the market share. If your favorite camera company becomes the dominant force in the market, then you can expect to pay more premium prices, and ain't nobody got time for that. So the next announcement was again over from Rumours, where I get a lot of my stuff from. The possibly an announcement from Sony of a Sony A6700 and a Sony A6900. Now, when I was researching into going full frame, I was really considering going away from Panasonic, and I draw up a big list of pros and cons for each camera system. And for my personal use, Panasonic just won out. And I'm sure maybe there was some bias in there that influenced it, but really, it'd come down to these few cameras really. The Canon R6, the Sony A7 III, and a Sony A6600, and I had a little look at a few others as well, Blackmagic and the Fujifilm X-T4. Sony A7 III would only shoot in 8-bit. It had quite a low quality screen. There was a few other things, and it just didn't tick the boxes for me. The A6400, 6600, I was actually really excited about. Again, but it was only 8-bit. You can only get those 10-bit codecs through an external monitor, which is going to be maybe $1,000 after you've bought the monitor, the hard drives, etc., etc. So that was a no for me. Panasonic had the most internal video codecs, and crucially, more than resolution, I was more looking for that 422 chroma subsampling in 10-bit. I think it's really, really useful to have. And the Panasonic have all of that. Like, they're literally one thing away from being like the best cameras, on the market, which is sorting out that autofocus. Which is better than you think. Just to let you know, it's not like it's so headache inducing. It's better than what you think it is, especially for photos. I'm taking photos of hawks and all sorts of stuff flying through the sky. Ain't that bad. For video and for vloggers, it's going to be more of a deal. But this 6600 almost ticks all the boxes in a way. And the announcement of these cameras is fundamentally going to mean that you probably are going to get 422 10-bit all internal and some amazing codecs. Now, another thing in the zeitgeist of the market is the idea that you need full frame. I've used broadcast cameras, free chip CCD cameras, can't remember what they're called now, 1-inch sensor cameras. I've used a whole swath of different cameras and different camera sensors. It's not that big a deal. There are certain limitations, of course, but fundamentally you should be able to work around those. Ultimately, I had to trade up for my GH5 line because and my G9, because doing wedding videos with in the UK is difficult in low light conditions. But if you give those cameras enough light, I was getting images just as good as any other camera, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of potential in that market, and it's a shame to see it go by the wayside. The potential lies in the fact it was so versatile. Add a speed booster and you're going to get even more light, and you're going to get like a Super 35 equivalent of a frame as opposed to 4/3. You could rig it up to your heart's content. What I'd love from this new GH announcement, I don't think Panasonic will do this, they should make their own speed booster, so you can use the L mount lenses on the GH range. That would be incredible. Redundancy is key for us creators and small businesses. If we are on a job and a camera fails or a piece of equipment fails, we need something to back it up, so we're not just standing there scratching our heads. This would open up some redundancy options. Unfortunately, I don't think it would mean you could use micro four thirds on the full frame, unless there was some sort of cropping option in the camera, which I think is possible. They've already got an APS-C style crop in there. And that's what's so good about these Sony cameras. This is what really makes me consider them. That APS-C sensor isn't really going to hold you back, but it also means because of their mount, you could get an APS-C camera and use lenses interchangeably between full frame and APS-C. So for redundancy, you could get 2 of these cameras or 1 of these cameras and a full frame Sony, and I think that's great. It's such a genius move, and I'm really excited about these cameras. I don't think I'll be upgrading my cameras too soon unless I find any more silly things like I found from this latest firmware thing, which is a small thing, but on a job that could have been a big thing. And ultimately, I'm not fanboyism only serves the company's pockets and not your own. You need to be working in a versatile and efficient way to get the best results. This is how I always approach everything, so I don't mind moving over to Sony or Canon or Nikon, or if Pentax all of a sudden come up with something crazy and amazing, I'd probably go for that as well. I'm a geek, so I love looking at all this stuff, but it's ultimately a tool to help fuel my creativity, make the creative process easier and more convenient. So as cool as it all is, it is just a tool, and I'm really excited by the idea of a 6700 and 6900 Sony APS-C camera with hopefully a better screen and more internal video codecs. Don't really care if it has 8K. I'm not interested in 8K. I think dynamic range and chroma subsampling are more important personally. And my only other gripe is it's like Sony A7C has been getting a lot of praise, and I think it's a great camera, but it's tiny, and I don't actually like cameras that small. It throws the balance of the camera off, and you can get micro shake, which is really a nightmare for doing wildlife photography. I get better shots out of my S1 with my Sigma 100-400 than I do using my S5 because of those micro jitters, and I don't use my S5 to do wildlife shots now, to be honest with you. I use my S1. Despite it being heavier, it balances out much better. Next announcement was, next rumour again from Mirrorless Rumours was a new Fujifilm medium format, the GH5II, I think it was called. So the megapixel wars continue. Another zeitgeist thing. For me personally, I think the sweet spot for megapixels is anything from 20 to like 36. My GH5S only shot 10 now, and I got great shots regardless of what anyone says. Same with the A7S III, you're going to get good shots even though it's only 12 megapixels, so I wouldn't worry too much unless you're going to put work in big on a print. And yeah, I think for anyone shooting medium format, this could be really good. I like what Fujifilm are doing with their medium format cameras. They've really sort of brought medium format more to the not to the masses, but it's a bit more accessible. So I really like what they're doing there. And right, if I sound exasperated like I'm talking really fast, this is the 4th time I've done this. First time I just wasn't happy with the results. I was a bit tired and it just come across. The second time it was too long, so I've tried to make it more concise. And then the third time, camera messed me up. And then the 4th time is this. So hopefully this one all works okay. But the main point of today's podcast was to talk about why I am making YouTube and podcasts when I'm a small business. How can social media help me and potential clients? How can I get across my services, and how can I work on my business at the same time? That's the main point of this podcast, and it's to give fellow creators and anyone in the same sort of position as me some helpful advice as well. And there's 3 main reasons for using social media, and number one's obvious. It's close to free advertising. It's the cheapest way you could do mass advertising and have a presence online that could reach to potentially millions and millions of people. That's just a given. But if you go onto my YouTube page, I've got a video on there, top 5 videos every marketer should know. It's well worth watching. And in my research for starting up my business and offering my services, I needed to know what services I could offer clients and what type, because it's very easy to be like, I can make you a video. Okay, well, what type of video? You need to know these type of things. What type of videos are out there and how can they benefit the clients? So in my research, I found that obviously video is now around us everywhere, on our phones, TVs, tablets, etc. And it's people engage with it more than anything as well. So obviously, if you're a business, you want to take advantage of this. And rather than just being like on a traditional TV channel where you could put out some really stylish advertisement, it's a really good opportunity to pull the curtain back and tell people a bit about you. I like to call it a bit like the soft sell. Rather than selling somebody an object and saying it costs X amount, you're basically saying, yeah, I do film, photography, etc., but this is me. People buy into personalities. It's a nice way for if anyone goes to your site to see who you and what you're about. And for me, I hope that's someone who is passionate about film and photography and knows what they're talking about. It gives you some sort of a little bit of authority, that a stamp of, okay, he knows his stuff. If any client watches this and I don't know much about film or photography, half of it's gonna sound like jargon. But at least I have an idea that I'm passionate and I know what I'm talking about. and they get to see a bit about me. And that is the first big reason. I guess you could call it the soft sell, getting your personality across. Reason number 2 would be in terms of, you've got to remember, you're essentially, no matter what you do, always probably a small fish in a really, really big pond, especially if you're any kind of creative. It's important that you get it's important that you get your name up in the search results, so it can help improve search engine optimization as well. And that ultimately makes it easier for clients to find you. And then when they find you, they can see your personality. So I like to think of everything as an ecosystem. Everything should feed into everything else. From my podcast, they should know about my YouTube or my webpage, and ultimately be able to contact me and ask for work or collaborations, things of that nature. So the second reason is more sort of proliferation on the internet, more saturation over social media pages that you should be taken advantage of. Basically, you don't have to pay what you'd have to pay for to put an advert on TV anymore. You can pay to boost posts and that, and maybe you should put that in, have that into your budget. But ultimately, it's going to increase your SEO, and it's going to make you easier to find. And when they find you, they're going to learn who and what you're about and the type of work that you can do as well. And then the third reason, I'm sure there's more reasons, but the third is a big reason. For a long time, I struggled over trying to justify making videos and podcasts and things like that. And then I had a moment of enlightenment. Sorry, I need a little bit of water. I can grab something a bit. And the moment was, why not? Why not? I mean, if you're a creative of any kind, it's not a job. Your thing is to create. So create. And when you're it's in that creating process that you sharpen your skills. So not only is it an opportunity to grow your business and show what you can do and what you're about, it's good for you to show your skills and to express yourself and get those things that you've got in your head out and express them. You don't have to justify it to anyone. Your friends and family won't always know or support as you'd like them what you do. They just won't. Not everyone will get it. Other people are busy. They have their own hobbies, etc. So don't try to play up for everyone else. There's probably an audience out there that will watch your stuff. And also remember, take an opportunity to go and support your friends, especially if they're creatives like yourself, or any of your friends. Give their pages a like or a share. There's a weird competitiveness sometimes that I've seen with people who aren't like superstars, where it's a strange unspoken competitiveness where no one will go and support your work or like stuff or share stuff or comment, or it's just really strange, and it's completely unnecessary. If you live in a place where you've got fellow creatives around you, you're all going to be stronger together than you are apart. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be competitive and try and outdo one another, but there are opportunities for collaborations that together would help you both or all of you grow. So it's so silly to see this competitiveness. Rather, it's nice to go to your friends' pages and give them a like, give them a share, give them a comment, give them a vote of confidence. And if that's reciprocated, it's amazing. And that's the sort of culture I would like to try and foster. So ultimately, do it because you want to do it. Don't have any expectations. Just do it because you want to do it. And a final piece of advice, though, would be to prioritize. Do you want to be a YouTuber or an influencer, or do you want to make a living making films? For me, I want to make a living doing corporate and promotional videos and photography. So everything I do is an ecosystem that tries to feed into that. And these podcasts and YouTube videos are ultimately to show people that I am passionate, I know what I'm talking about for the most part, and that it feeds into growing my business, which means I can't do this all the time. And I stopped trying to do that a long time ago because it's impossible. It just leads to burnout. Bigger creators that do that are usually hiring people to edit their videos and help out with content. If you're a one-man band, it's not lowering your dreams, it's managing your expectations and managing your goals, because I want to grow my business, but I've got stuff to do. And doing this today is a sacrifice because I've lost morning time that I could have been working on work for clients. But now all that means is, well, that just means I have to sacrifice some time at night and work a little bit later. You've got to understand these. There's every action an equal and opposite reaction. So you're always going to lose and gain something somewhere. And that's about it for today's episode. I hope this has helped enlighten anyone who's in the same sort of situation as me. If you like this podcast and you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, give me a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the sub, hit the bell icon so you can keep notified of future videos. I've got more content on the way, whenever I've got the time, that is. And hopefully I'll be back soon for some more podcast venting, news, tips, advice. I'll catch you all next time. See ya.
The Pictorialist. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.